You shouldn't create your own game engine. If you want to make a game, then make a game, and if you want to create a game engine, then create a game engine. This is quite a popular phrase which I have heard at least multiple times from different sources. While there's some merit to it, I believe there's still a lot of space for experimentation and in-house solutions. Around a year ago, I released my first game on Steam. The production took exactly a year and 1 month. In this time I managed to create almost from scratch a custom engine and the game itself. I want to tell you a story of how Pumpkin Man come to be, and to be perfectly clear, it was a year when I still had to do my day job and manage other responsibilities. This video is intended to show how I managed to release a non-trivial game in a relatively short time while also making an engine. I clearly see the benefits of using a production-ready game engine like Unity or Unreal. The number one reason why I'm going through the pain of making so much from scratch is simply because I enjoy making my own stuff and learning all the details of game development. There are also quite a few reasons why I don't enjoy working with out-of-shelf engines, but that's the story for another time. Now, what did the production of Pumpkin Man look like? An idea for this game looked quite different from the final product. My original plan was to complete development in single month. The concept itself didn't change that much. The game was a Bomberman clone in the Halloween setting. Yet, the game would be much simpler with only few levels. All enemies would be different from each other only by their appearance and not by their behavior. I didn't have any plans on releasing this game on Steam. In the past, many of my projects did overwhelm me and I ditched them as a result. So this time I decided to go small. And as it often happens, a month turned into a couple of months. I don't recall what was the reason for me extending the scope of the game, but I remember when I decided that this game was turning into something that can be officially released. It was a moment when I had almost all the basic mechanics in place and I added some environment graphics. It was then that Pumpkin Man started to look like a full-fledged game. Starting small did help to keep the scope of the project in check. I didn't go crazy with the number of mechanics I put in the game. I built a solid foundation with movement, combat and character progression first and then built all the engine tooling around this. This way I knew exactly what kind of tooling my engine needed. The core part of the process was a level editor. Having it integrated directly into the game itself allowed for a quick iteration and instant testing. Other parts of the tooling included debug views for the monster behavior. By having a short and clear list of features, I could put more focus into making the mechanics I already had as good as I could. To make combat more engaging, each type of enemy has unique behavior, which sometimes required additional debug views that I used to track if monsters were behaving correctly. Other parts of the engine included a custom particle system, which you can see in action in explosion or falling leaves, the lighting system, and what may not be obvious, but all user interface, including tooling, uses a homemade UI library. The trap of making an own engine I've seen some of the devs falling into is to start with the engine and not the game itself. For Pumpkin Man, I had almost all the basic mechanics prototyped before I started thinking about tooling. This way, I wasn't wasting my time on features I didn't need. The engine was developed closely to the game and for this game only. The experience I gained during development can be easily transferred to the next project. That's why for the new game I'm doing a bit of a tooling work before making a prototype. Yet only a minimal amount and only stuff I'm sure will be needed. Managing scope helped me to create a game which is coherent. It has simple rules, but at the same time is not trivial. By introducing new skills, enemies and biomes every now and then, I ensure that the game remains engaging through the whole playthrough, which usually takes from 3 to 6 hours. Another decision I made during development was not to make everything from scratch. You have to draw the line somewhere, and in the end my goal was to finally release a full-fledged game, not just something made quickly during the game jam or have another unfinished, overblown project to the collection. There are already plenty of tasks in making tooling and the game itself, so not to burden myself too much, I decided to use a game development framework called Monogame. I already know this technology quite well from my previous projects and I'm very familiar with the C# language as it is something I'm using in my full-time job. Using Monogame allowed me not to worry about some of the most fundamental tasks that each video game has to do, like rendering graphics, managing resources or handling input devices, while at the same time I remain in full control of the gameplay and tooling part of the codebase. This approach saved me probably a few months from the development process, which I would mostly like spend learning lower level APIs, like for example OpenGL, which is something I would like to eventually do, but by making learning curve less steep, I'm making sure that there's some chance of me finishing the project at all. In the end, I also saved a lot of time by cutting corners. I was pretty optimistic with my schedule and had to exclude some features I was planning. For example, my original goal was to have a second playable character unlocked after the first playthrough, and some optional puzzle levels. To save time, I did stick to mechanic which I have already implemented, that is combat. More of my focus went into making fighting more dynamic and enjoyable than adding more content. I had a well-established framework for adding new enemies, which helped me to create every planned monster in the game. A lot of AI code, like fight finding, could be easily reused between different types of monsters. I also had time to adjust the combat mechanic itself, not so long before the release. The final way in which I did save time was by using Asset Store for in-game music and sound. I'm happy with the soundtrack collection I managed to find. Choosing sounds was more difficult as it was way harder to find samples which work together nicely and don't feel like each was made in entirely different style. Finally, it helped a lot that Pumpkin Man is a Halloween themed game, so there was no point releasing it after the 31st of October. I also very much didn't want to wait another year to release the game. Having a strict deadline was for sure an excellent motivator. 2 months before the release, I went into full panic mode and spent almost every spare time working on the game. The final week was really tight. Less to say, I finished working on the boss fight 2 days before game's release. It was basically 2 months of self-induct crunch, which isn't ideal. It could end up badly for the game quality, but I managed to ship it, and it had only minor bugs which were fixed shortly after the game released. Yet, due to the tight schedule, not everything around this game was a success. Mainly, I didn't have any time for marketing. And that's something I'm trying to change right now in my way of doing things, by getting the word out there. And that's a full story of how Pumpkin Man came to be. In the end, I'm really proud of what I have achieved, and that I finally managed to release a game after 15 years of building a backlog of unfinished projects. If you're curious about the game itself, go check out its demo on Steam. It covers 8 first levels of the game and saved games transfer to full product. The demo takes around 1 hour to complete. That's all for today's video. Leave a comment if you have any questions, subscribe for more, and I will see you in the next video.